Ruthless bikers taunt a soldier at a gas station. His response leaves them frozen. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the small gas station on the edge of town. It was the kind of place where locals stopped for a quick fill-up and a chat with the attendant, but tonight, the quiet was broken by the low rumble of motorcycle engines. A group of bikers pulled up, their loud laughter echoing as they parked their machines haphazardly around the station. Dressed in black leather jackets adorned with patches and emblems, they exuded an air of arrogance and danger. The leader, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, swaggered toward the convenience store while the others lingered by their bikes, lighting cigarettes and cracking jokes. Inside the store, Jack Callahan was filling up a cup of coffee. He was a man of few words, his presence unassuming but steady. Dressed in a simple brown jacket over his military uniform, he was on his way back to base after visiting his family in a nearby town. Jack had served in the army for over a decade, and while his quiet demeanor often made him blend into the background, those who knew him well understood the strength and discipline he carried within. As Jack stepped outside with his coffee in hand, the bikers immediately noticed him. Their laughter grew louder as they exchanged glances, clearly amused by his presence. "Hey, soldier boy," one of them called out, smirking as he gestured toward Jack. "You lost or something?" Jack ignored the comment and walked toward his motorcycle, a modest but reliable machine that stood out among the sleek, customized bikes of the group. He placed his coffee on the seat and began checking the fuel pump. "Look at this guy," another biker said, nudging his friend. "Thinks he's too good to answer." The leader of the group, Scar, approached Jack with a lazy grin. "You in a hurry, soldier? Don't you want to say hi?" Jack glanced up briefly, his expression calm but unreadable. "Just passing through." Scar's grin widened, and he motioned for his crew to gather around. "Passing through, huh? Well, we were just thinking of having some fun. You don't mind, do you?" Jack's hands stilled on the fuel pump. He knew exactly where this was going, but he remained composed. Years of training had taught him how to handle situations like this, not with panic, but with precision. The bikers closed in, their mocking laughter growing louder as they surrounded him. One of them reached out and tapped the emblem on his jacket. "What's this? You think that makes you better than us?" Jack didn't flinch. "It means I've served my country." "Oh, big man," Scar said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Well, we don't take kindly to big shots around here." Another biker leaned in, his voice low and threatening. "Maybe you should show us some respect, soldier boy." Jack straightened, his gaze steady as he looked each of them in the eye. "Respect is earned, not taken." The comment wiped the smirks off their faces. Scar's grin faltered for a moment before he leaned closer, his voice a low growl. "You've got a smart mouth for someone outnumbered." Jack didn't respond. Instead, he calmly finished fueling his bike, his movements deliberate. The bikers, mistaking his calm for fear, grew bolder. One of them stepped forward and shoved Jack's shoulder. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" Jack stumbled slightly but regained his footing, his expression unchanged. He looked at the group, his voice steady. "I'd think carefully about your next move." The warning seemed to amuse them. Scar laughed, gesturing to his crew. "Hear that? He thinks he can take us?" The group erupted into laughter, but Jack remained unfazed. His military training had prepared him for far worse than a group of bullies at a gas station. He knew that his restraint was his greatest strength, and their greatest weakness. As the bikers continued to taunt him, Jack slowly removed his jacket, revealing the tactical vest underneath. The sight of it gave them pause, but Scar quickly recovered, his grin returning. "What's that supposed to do? Scare us?" he sneered. Jack took a step forward, his voice calm but firm. "I've faced enemies far more dangerous than you. Walk away while you still can." The air grew tense as the bikers realized they were dealing with someone who wasn't intimidated by their numbers. Scar hesitated, his confidence wavering as he studied Jack's unyielding gaze. For a moment, no one moved. The only sound was the soft hum of the gas station lights and the distant chirping of crickets. Then, without warning, one of the bikers lunged at Jack. What happened next was a blur. As one of the bikers lunged at Jack, he moved with a speed and precision that caught everyone off guard. Years of military training had honed his reflexes to perfection. In one fluid motion, Jack sidestepped the attack and used the biker's momentum against him, sending him sprawling to the ground. The group froze for a moment, stunned by how effortlessly Jack had taken down one of their own. The biker on the ground groaned, clutching his shoulder, but Jack didn't gloat or escalate. He remained calm, his posture steady and ready. Scar's smirk was gone now, replaced by a look of anger and embarrassment. "Lucky shot," he growled, stepping closer. "Let's see if you can handle all of us." The remaining bikers closed in, forming a tight circle around Jack. They were no longer laughing. The tension in the air was palpable, but Jack didn't flinch. He raised his hands slightly, palms open, as if to show he didn't want to fight. "You don't want to do this," Jack said evenly, his voice calm but commanding. "Walk away while you still can." Scar sneered. "Big words, soldier boy. Let's see if you can back them up." With that, two bikers charged at Jack simultaneously. Jack moved like a seasoned fighter, dodging the first punch and deflecting the second with his forearm. He countered with a quick strike to one biker's ribs, sending him staggering back, and used a sweeping kick to trip the other, who landed hard on the pavement. The remaining bikers hesitated, exchanging uneasy glances. It was clear that Jack wasn't just some random guy. They were dealing with someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Scar, however, wasn't ready to back down. He pulled a knife from his belt and pointed it at Jack. "You think you're tough? Let's see how tough you are now." Jack's eyes narrowed, but he didn't panic. He had faced worse threats in combat zones, and he knew how to handle armed opponents. He took a step back, giving himself space to maneuver. "I'm giving you one last chance to walk away," Jack said, his voice low and firm. "Put the knife down." Scar laughed, though it sounded more forced this time. "You don't scare me." Jack didn't respond. Instead, he waited, his stance relaxed but ready. He knew that Scar's bravado was a mask for his growing fear. The others watched nervously, their confidence shaken by how easily Jack had handled their friends. Scar lunged forward, slashing the knife through the air. Jack sidestepped the attack with ease, grabbing Scar's wrist and twisting it in one swift motion. The knife clattered to the ground, and Scar cried out in pain as Jack immobilized him, pinning his arm behind his back. "Enough," Jack said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. "This ends now." Scar struggled, but Jack's grip was unyielding. The other bikers stepped back, their earlier bravado completely gone. It was clear that they had underestimated their opponent. Jack released Scar, who stumbled forward and turned to face him, clutching his arm. There was no fight left in him now, only anger and humiliation. "Get out of here," Jack said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And don't come back." Scar hesitated, his pride warring with his better judgment. Finally, he nodded to his crew, and they began to retreat, muttering curses under their breath. Scar shot Jack one last glare before turning and walking away. As the bikers mounted their motorcycles and roared off into the night, the gas station fell silent once more. Jack took a deep breath, his body relaxing now that the immediate threat was gone. He bent down to pick up his coffee, which had somehow survived the scuffle. The gas station attendant, a young man who had been watching the entire scene unfold from behind the counter, stepped outside, his face pale with shock. "Are you okay, man?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I'm fine," Jack replied, taking a sip of his now lukewarm coffee. "Are you?" The attendant nodded quickly. But that was incredible. Who are you?" "Just a guy passing through," Jack said with a small smile. "Nothing more." The attendant looked unconvinced but didn't press further. "Well, thanks. Those guys come around here sometimes, causing trouble. I've never seen anyone stand up to them like that." Jack nodded, his expression serious. "They won't be back. But if they do, call the police. Don't try to handle it yourself." "Got it," the attendant said, his admiration clear. "Take care, man." Jack nodded again and mounted his motorcycle. As he rode away from the gas station, the adrenaline from the encounter began to fade, replaced by a quiet sense of resolve. He didn't seek out fights, but he wouldn't stand by and let others be bullied or threatened. It was a principle he had lived by throughout his military career, and it was one he carried with him wherever he went. The next morning, Jack arrived at the base, ready to resume his duties. The events of the previous night were already fading into the background, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the encounter at the gas station had been a reminder of something important: the power of standing up for what was right, even in the face of overwhelming odds. As he walked into the barracks, one of his fellow soldiers greeted him with a grin. "Heard you had an interesting night," the soldier said, holding up his phone. "You're famous now." Jack frowned, confused, until the soldier showed him a video. It was footage of the gas station confrontation, taken by someone who had been passing by. The video had gone viral, with millions of views and thousands of comments praising Jack's calm demeanor and skill. "Great," Jack muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Just what I needed." "Hey, don't knock it," the soldier said with a laugh. "People are calling you a hero." Jack shook his head. "I'm no hero. I just did what needed to be done." But as the days went on, the video continued to gain traction, sparking conversations about courage, discipline, and the importance of standing up to bullies. Jack received messages from people all over the world, thanking him for his actions and sharing their own stories of resilience. For Jack, the attention was uncomfortable, but he couldn't deny the impact it was having. If his actions inspired others to stand up for themselves or to help those in need, then maybe it was worth the unwanted spotlight. A few weeks later, Jack received an unexpected visitor at the base. It was the gas station attendant, who introduced himself as Ryan. "Hey," Ryan said, looking slightly nervous. "I just wanted to thank you again. After what happened that night, I decided to make some changes in my life. I've started taking self-defense classes, and I've been helping out at a local community center. I guess seeing you stand up to those guys made me realize I can do more." Jack smiled, his respect for the young man growing. "Good for you, Ryan. Keep it up." Ryan hesitated, then added, "You know, a lot of people think what you did was about fighting. But it wasn't, was it? It was about staying calm and standing your ground." Jack nodded. "Exactly. Violence is a last resort. But sometimes, standing firm is all it takes to stop a bad situation from getting worse." Ryan grinned. "Well, you've definitely inspired a lot of people. Thanks again." As Ryan left, Jack couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. He hadn't sought out recognition, but if his actions had made a difference, then he was grateful for the opportunity. Jack tried to push the viral fame out of his mind as much as possible, but it wasn't easy. The story of the gas station soldier had grown larger than life, and requests for interviews poured in from news outlets, podcasts, and even late-night talk shows. Jack declined them all, wanting nothing more than to focus on his duties at the base and keep his life as simple as possible. But the world had other plans. One day, while Jack was in the mess hall eating lunch, his commanding officer, Colonel Anderson, approached him with a clipboard in hand. "Callahan," Anderson said, sitting across from him, "we need to talk." Jack straightened, his instincts kicking in. "Yes, sir?" Anderson placed the clipboard on the table, his expression a mix of curiosity and amusement. "You're quite the celebrity these days. I've been fielding calls from everyone from the Pentagon to national charities who want to use your story for recruitment campaigns." Jack groaned inwardly. "Sir, with all due respect, I'd rather stay out of the spotlight." Anderson nodded. "I figured you'd say that. And I respect it, Callahan. But before you dismiss this entirely, hear me out. Your story has inspired a lot of people. Not because you fought back, but because of how you handled the situation. Calmly. Professionally. That's something the world needs to see more of, especially now." Jack paused, considering Anderson's words. He had always believed in leading by example, but the idea of becoming some kind of public figure made him uncomfortable. "What exactly are they asking for, sir?" "Nothing outrageous," Anderson replied. "There's a veterans organization that wants you to speak at one of their events. They help former service members transition back into civilian life. I think it's a good cause, and I think your perspective could mean a lot to them." Jack hesitated, but he could see the sincerity in Anderson's expression. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "Good," Anderson said, standing. "That's all I'm asking. Let me know by the end of the week." Later that night, Jack sat in his room, replaying the events of the gas station in his mind. He hadn't thought much about the significance of what he had done at the time, It was just instinct, a combination of training and his own sense of justice. But if it could help others, maybe it was worth stepping out of his comfort zone. The next day he called Anderson's office. "I'll do it," he said simply. The event was held in a large conference center, with hundreds of veterans and their families in attendance. Jack felt out of place as he stood backstage, adjusting the tie he rarely wore. Public speaking wasn't his strong suit, and he questioned whether he had made the right decision. But when the MC introduced him, the applause that filled the room was warm and genuine. Jack stepped onto the stage, scanning the faces in the audience. These were people who had served, who understood the sacrifices and challenges that came with wearing the uniform. If anyone could understand him, it was them. Jack took a deep breath and began. "Good evening. My name is Jack Callahan, and I'm not a hero." The audience fell silent, hanging on his every word. "I know that's not how the media has portrayed me, but the truth is, I'm just a soldier who did what he thought was right." That night at the gas station, I didn't set out to make a statement or become some kind of symbol. I just saw a situation where someone needed to stand up to bullies, and I acted. He paused, letting his words sink in. But the truth is, what happened that night wasn't about me. It was about what all of us are capable of when we choose to stay calm under pressure and do what's right. It's about the values we learn in service: discipline, respect, and the courage to protect others. Jack went on to share stories from his time in the military, moments that had shaped him and taught him the importance of standing up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. He spoke of his comrades, the sacrifices they had made, and the lessons he carried with him every day. When he finished, the room erupted into applause. Jack felt a wave of relief and gratitude wash over him. For the first time, he realized that his story wasn't just his own. It belonged to everyone who had ever faced adversity and chosen to rise above it. After the event, Jack was approached by dozens of attendees who thanked him for his words. Many shared their own struggles, from dealing with post-traumatic stress to finding their place in civilian life. Jack listened to each of them, offering words of encouragement and understanding. One man, a former Marine named Tom, pulled Jack aside. "You've got a gift, Callahan," he said. "People listen to you because they see themselves in you. Don't waste that." Jack nodded, humbled by the sentiment. "Thank you. That means a lot." Over the next few months, Jack found himself increasingly involved in veteran advocacy. He worked with organizations to provide resources for transitioning service members, spoke at schools about the importance of discipline and respect, and even helped train law enforcement officers in de-escalation tactics. Though he hadn't sought out this role, Jack embraced it as an extension of his service. He saw it as another way to make a difference, to use his experiences for good. But through it all, he remained true to himself. He didn't seek fame or accolades, he simply wanted to do what he had always done: serve others. One day, Jack received a letter from Ryan, the gas station attendant. Enclosed was a photo of Ryan standing with a group of teenagers at the community center where he now volunteered. The caption read, "Making a difference, thanks to you." Jack smiled as he read the letter. It was a reminder of how small actions could ripple outward, touching lives in ways he could never have imagined. As he folded the letter and placed it in his desk drawer, Jack felt a deep sense of purpose. His journey had taken unexpected turns, but he wouldn't have had it any other way. He had learned that strength wasn't just about physical ability, it was about character, resilience, and the willingness to stand up for what was right. And in that, Jack knew he had found his true calling. As Jack's involvement with veteran advocacy grew, so did his opportunities to make an impact. He began receiving invitations to speak at international forums, collaborate with global organizations, and even advise policymakers on how to better support veterans and their families. For Jack, this work felt meaningful in a way that nothing else ever had. But amidst the growing responsibilities, Jack remained deeply connected to his roots. He still served at the base, training young recruits and emphasizing not just tactical skills but the importance of integrity, discipline, and humility. His motto, "Lead by example," resonated with everyone he mentored. One recruit, a young woman named Maya, stood out in particular. Maya was driven and capable but struggled with self-doubt. Jack noticed her hesitation during a training exercise one day and pulled her aside afterward. "You're good at this, Maya," he said, his tone encouraging. "What's holding you back?" She hesitated before answering. "I don't know if I belong here, sir. Everyone else seems so confident. I feel like I'm always playing catch-up." Jack nodded, understanding all too well the feeling of doubt. "Confidence isn't about never doubting yourself," he said. "It's about pushing forward even when you do. Everyone starts somewhere. You just have to trust the process, and yourself." Maya's eyes brightened slightly. "You really think I can do this?" "I don't just think so, I know so," Jack replied. "You've got what it takes. Now show the world what you're made of." Over the next few weeks, Jack watched as Maya began to flourish, her confidence growing with each passing day. Her transformation reminded him why he had chosen this path. It wasn't about recognition or accolades, it was about helping others find their strength. One day, Jack received a call from Ryan, the gas station attendant he had inspired months earlier. Ryan's voice was filled with excitement as he shared the news. He had been accepted into a law enforcement training program. "I wouldn't have even tried if it weren't for you," Ryan admitted. "You showed me what it means to stand up for others, and I want to do the same." Jack felt a surge of pride. "That's great news, Ryan. You're going to do amazing things." Ryan paused for a moment before adding, "Actually, there's something else. I've been thinking about the bikers from that night. They haven't been back, but I know they're still out there causing trouble. I want to figure out a way to help people like me who feel powerless against bullies." Jack considered Ryan's words carefully. "That's a noble goal," he said. "And I think you're the right person to make it happen. Just remember, it's not about fighting back. It's about creating a world where people don't have to." Ryan nodded, his determination clear even over the phone. "I won't forget that. Thanks, Jack." As the months passed, Jack's work continued to ripple outward. The viral video from the gas station, which he had once tried to ignore, had become a symbol of resilience and quiet strength. People from all walks of life reached out to share how the story had inspired them to stand up for themselves or support others. One letter stood out in particular. It was from a high school teacher in a small town who had shown the video to her students during a lesson on courage. "Your actions sparked a conversation that brought my class together," she wrote. "For the first time, my students opened up about their struggles, their fears, and their dreams. Thank you for reminding them that one person can make a difference." Jack kept the letter on his desk, a reminder of the unexpected ways his story had touched lives. Despite the positive impact he was making, Jack occasionally found himself reflecting on the simplicity of his life before the gas station incident. He missed the quiet anonymity of his days as an ordinary soldier, where his actions spoke for themselves without the glare of public attention. One evening, as he sat on the porch of his modest home, watching the sunset, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was from Lila, a young woman who had once been a student at one of the schools he had spoken at during his advocacy work. She had sent a photo of herself holding a certificate, along with a message, "I graduated today. Thank you for believing in me." Jack smiled, his heart full. Moments like these reminded him why he had embraced his new role. It wasn't about the spotlight, it was about the lives he had the privilege to touch. Meanwhile, the bikers from the gas station incident had largely disappeared from Jack's thoughts. He assumed they had moved on to other towns, likely finding new targets for their intimidation. But one day, while stopping at a diner during a long ride, Jack found himself face to face with a familiar figure. Scar, the leader of the biker gang, was sitting at a corner booth, nursing a cup of coffee. His leather jacket was gone, replaced by a simple flannel shirt, and he looked older, wearier than Jack remembered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Scar gestured to the seat across from him. "Mind if I buy you a coffee?" Jack hesitated but eventually nodded, sitting down. "Didn't expect to see you here." Scar chuckled, though it lacked the bravado Jack remembered. "Didn't expect to run into you either. Guess fate has a funny sense of humor." Jack studied him carefully. "What's changed?" Scar sighed, running a hand through his hair. "That night at the gas station, I've thought about it a lot. You could have humiliated me, could have called the cops, but you didn't. You just stood your ground and let us walk away." Jack raised an eyebrow. "And?" And it made me realize I've been living my life all wrong, Scar admitted. I've been a bully, plain and simple. After that night, I started to take a hard look at myself. I quit the gang, got a job at a mechanic's shop, and started trying to make amends. Jack nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. That takes courage. Scar met his gaze. It was you who showed me that. I just wanted to say, thank you. Jack extended his hand, and Scar shook it firmly. Good luck, Jack said. Keep doing the right thing. As Scar left the diner, Jack felt a sense of closure. That encounter at the gas station had been more than just a confrontation. It had been a turning point, not only for Jack but for everyone involved. In the years that followed, Jack continued to balance his work with his quiet, steady life. He remained a soldier at heart, leading by example and inspiring others to find their strength. And though he never sought fame, his story became a reminder to people everywhere that one person's courage could ripple outward, changing the world in ways they could never imagine. For Jack, the lesson was simple. True strength wasn't about overpowering others. It was about standing firm in the face of adversity and using that strength to lift others up. And in doing so, he had left a legacy far greater than he ever could have planned. Jack's encounter with Scar at the diner left him in a reflective mood for weeks. He hadn't set out to change anyone's life that night at the gas station, but the ripples of his actions continued to expand. It was humbling, yet it also came with a sense of responsibility he hadn't anticipated. As Jack returned to his routine, splitting his time between his duties on base, his advocacy work, and mentoring young recruits, he began to notice a shift in how people approached him. No longer just a soldier, Jack had become a symbol of quiet resilience and moral strength. It was a role he accepted reluctantly, but one he carried with honor. One morning, Jack received an unexpected invitation from a national leadership summit. The event brought together influential figures from various industries, business leaders, educators, activists, and military personnel to discuss how to build stronger, more compassionate communities. The organizers wanted Jack to deliver the keynote speech. At first, he hesitated. Public speaking still wasn't his favorite activity, and the idea of standing in front of such a high-profile audience was daunting. But as he read through the details of the summit, one phrase stood out to him: leadership through integrity. Those words resonated deeply with Jack. He had spent his entire career embodying that principle, and if his experiences could inspire others, then perhaps it was worth stepping outside his comfort zone once again. Jack accepted the invitation and began preparing his speech. As he reflected on his journey, he realized that his message wasn't about heroics or grand gestures. It was about the everyday choices that defined a person's character, the decision to act with integrity, to stand up for what was right, and to treat others with dignity and respect. The day of the summit arrived, and Jack found himself standing backstage, adjusting his tie and rehearsing his opening lines. The auditorium was packed, with thousands of attendees and countless more watching via livestream. Jack could feel the weight of their expectations, but he reminded himself of the lessons he had learned during his military service. Stay calm, stay focused, and trust in your training. When the MC introduced him, the applause was thunderous. Jack stepped onto the stage, his heart pounding, but as he looked out at the audience, a sense of calm washed over him. These were people who wanted to make a difference, just as he did. They weren't here to judge him, they were here to learn. Jack began his speech with a story, not about the gas station or his viral fame, but about a mission early in his military career when he and his unit had faced a life-or-death situation. It was a story about teamwork, trust, and the quiet courage of ordinary people. As soldiers, we're trained to make decisions under pressure, Jack said. But what I've learned is that the toughest decisions aren't the ones we make in combat. They're the ones we make every day, when no one's watching and the stakes feel smaller. Those are the moments that define who we are. He spoke about the importance of leading by example, of standing firm in the face of adversity, and of using one's strength to uplift others. His words were simple but powerful, and as he spoke, he could see the impact they were having on the audience. When Jack finished, the standing ovation was immediate and heartfelt. He felt a mixture of relief and gratitude as he stepped off the stage, knowing he had done his best to share what he believed in. After the speech, Jack was approached by countless attendees who wanted to thank him or share their own stories. Among them was a young entrepreneur named Elena, who ran a nonprofit focused on providing mentorship programs for at-risk youth. "Your speech really hit home for me," Elena said. "We've been struggling to get our programs off the ground, but hearing you talk about resilience and integrity reminded me why I started this in the first place." Jack listened intently, offering words of encouragement and even suggesting potential partners who might be able to help. By the time their conversation ended, Elena looked reinvigorated, ready to tackle the challenges ahead. Moments like these reminded Jack of why he had stepped into this role. It wasn't about the applause or the recognition. It was about planting seeds of change in the hearts of others. As the months passed, Jack's work continued to evolve. He became a sought-after advisor, helping organizations develop leadership programs and de-escalation training. He also worked with local schools, sharing his experiences with students and teaching them the values of empathy and respect. But Jack remained grounded, always returning to the base where his military journey had begun. His recruits saw him not just as a superior officer but as a mentor who genuinely cared about their growth. He took the time to know each of them, learning their strengths and helping them overcome their challenges. One evening, after a particularly grueling training exercise, a recruit named Ethan approached Jack. Ethan was one of the youngest in the group, eager but often doubting his abilities. "Sir, can I ask you something?" Ethan said hesitantly. "Of course," Jack replied. "How do you stay so calm under pressure, even when things get tough?" Jack thought for a moment before answering. "It's not about never feeling pressure. It's about how you respond to it. For me, it's remembering why I'm doing what I'm doing. When you focus on the bigger picture, the little things don't seem so overwhelming." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I'll try to remember that." "You'll get there," Jack said with a reassuring smile. "Just keep pushing yourself and don't be afraid to fail. That's how we grow." Jack's influence continued to spread in ways he hadn't anticipated. One day, he received a letter from a woman in a small town who had started a community watch program after being inspired by his story. Another letter came from a high school principal who had implemented a leadership curriculum based on Jack's principles. But perhaps the most unexpected impact was on Scar, the former biker leader. Scar had stayed true to his promise to turn his life around, becoming a mentor for at-risk youth and sharing his own story as a cautionary tale. Scar reached out to Jack, inviting him to visit the community center where he volunteered. Jack accepted, curious to see the transformation for himself. When he arrived, Jack was struck by the energy and optimism of the place. Kids of all ages were engaged in activities, from art projects to sports to leadership workshops. Scar greeted Jack warmly, his once intimidating demeanor replaced by a genuine sense of purpose. "This is what I've been working on," Scar said, gesturing to the bustling room. "I figured if I could help even one kid avoid making the mistakes I made, it'd be worth it." Jack nodded, impressed. "You've done good work here. I'm proud of you." Scar smiled, his gratitude evident. "It's all because of you, Jack. You didn't just stand up to me that night. You showed me what it means to be better." As Jack drove home that evening, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. His journey had been filled with twists and turns, but it had led him to a place where he could make a real difference. He thought about the gas station encounter that had started it all. At the time, it had seemed like a small, isolated incident. But looking back, Jack realized it had been a catalyst, a reminder that even the simplest acts of courage could ripple outward, changing lives in ways he could never have imagined. Jack's story wasn't about heroics or perfection. It was about resilience, integrity, and the power of choosing to do what's right. And as he looked toward the future, he knew there were still more lives to touch, more lessons to share, and more seeds to plant. Because in the end, Jack Callahan wasn't just a soldier. He was a leader, a mentor, and a beacon of hope for anyone searching for the strength to stand tall in the face of adversity. And his story was far from over. Jack Callahan's life was a testament to the idea that one act of integrity could set off a chain reaction. His quiet resilience and steadfast principles had touched countless lives, yet Jack remained deeply humble about his journey. He often reminded himself that the work wasn't about him. It was about the people he served and the values he stood for. As Jack's influence grew, he began to think more about the legacy he wanted to leave behind. He had spent years mentoring recruits, advocating for veterans, and inspiring communities, but he wanted to ensure that the lessons he had learned would endure long after he was gone. One day, while sitting in his modest office on base, Jack began jotting down ideas for a project that had been on his mind for some time. He envisioned a leadership academy, an institution where people from all walks of life could come to learn not just skills but values. The academy would focus on teaching empathy, resilience, and ethical decision-making, with a curriculum rooted in the principles Jack had lived by. He shared the idea with his commanding officer, Colonel Anderson, who immediately saw its potential. "This could be your greatest contribution, Callahan," Anderson said. "You've already inspired so many people. Imagine how many more lives you could change with something like this." Encouraged by Anderson's support, Jack began assembling a team to bring his vision to life. He reached out to educators, psychologists, military leaders, and community organizers, all of whom were eager to contribute. Together, they worked to design a program that would empower individuals to lead with integrity, whether in their personal lives, their professions, or their communities. The Callahan Leadership Academy officially opened its doors 2 years later. The inaugural class included a diverse group of students, young professionals, military veterans, community activists, and even teenagers from underserved neighborhoods. Each participant brought their own unique perspective, but they all shared a common goal: to become better leaders. Jack personally led many of the sessions, drawing on his own experiences to teach lessons about courage, humility, and the importance of standing up for others. He encouraged open dialogue, fostering an environment where students felt safe to share their challenges and learn from one another. One of the students, a single mother named Carla, stood out for her determination and resilience. Carla had enrolled in the academy after leaving an abusive relationship, hoping to rebuild her confidence and create a better life for her young son. During a session on overcoming fear, Carla shared her story with the group. "I used to think I wasn't strong enough to stand up for myself," she said, her voice trembling. "But I'm learning that strength isn't about being fearless, it's about facing your fears head-on." Jack nodded, his respect for Carla evident. "You're absolutely right," he said. "And the fact that you're here, sharing your story, shows just how strong you are." Carla's journey became a source of inspiration for her fellow students, and by the end of the program, she had not only regained her confidence but also launched a community initiative to support survivors of domestic violence. The academy quickly gained a reputation for its transformative impact, attracting participants from across the country and even internationally. Jack was proud of what they had built, but he remained focused on the mission, never letting the success go to his head. One day, he received a letter from a high-ranking official in Washington, D.C., inviting him to attend a national summit on leadership. The event would bring together influential figures from various sectors to discuss how to address the country's most pressing challenges. Jack hesitated at first, unsure if he wanted to step back into the public spotlight. But after discussing it with Colonel Anderson and his team, he decided to accept the invitation. He saw it as an opportunity to share the principles of the academy on a larger stage. The summit was held in the nation's capital, drawing leaders from government, business, education, and nonprofit organizations. Jack was scheduled to speak on the second day, and as he prepared his remarks, he thought about the core message he wanted to convey. When the day arrived, Jack stood on the stage, facing an audience of some of the most powerful and influential people in the country. But he spoke with the same calm humility that had defined his journey. "Leadership," he began, "isn't about titles or power. It's about responsibility. It's about using whatever influence you have to make a positive difference in the lives of others." He went on to share stories from his military service, his work at the academy, and the countless individuals who had inspired him along the way. He spoke about the importance of leading with empathy, building trust, and staying true to one's values, even in the face of adversity. As Jack finished his speech, the room erupted into applause. Many of the attendees approached him afterward to express their admiration, including several policymakers who were interested in incorporating the Academy's principles into national leadership programs. Jack was encouraged by their enthusiasm, but he knew that real change would take time and effort. Still, he was willing to do whatever it took to create a ripple effect that could reach far beyond his own lifetime. Back at the academy, Jack continued to mentor students and oversee the program's growth. One day, he received a surprise visit from Ryan, the former gas station attendant who had been inspired by Jack's actions. Ryan had completed his law enforcement training and was now working as a community liaison officer, focused on building trust between police and the neighborhoods they served. "I just wanted to say thank you again," Ryan said as they sat in Jack's office. "You probably don't realize how much you changed my life that night." Jack smiled, his expression warm. "I didn't do anything special, Ryan. You're the one who decided to take action and make a difference." Ryan shook his head. "You showed me what was possible. And now, I'm trying to do the same for others." Jack nodded, his heart full. That's what it's all about. As the years went on, Jack began to step back from his active role at the academy, entrusting its leadership to a new generation of educators and mentors. He remained involved as an advisor, but he also took more time to enjoy the quieter moments of life. One evening, as he sat on the porch of his home, watching the sun set over the horizon, Jack reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a chance encounter at a gas station to the creation of a leadership academy, his life had been shaped by a series of unexpected twists and turns. But through it all, one thing had remained constant: his commitment to living with integrity and using his strength to uplift others. For Jack, that was the true measure of success. And as he looked toward the future, he knew that the seeds he had planted would continue to grow, inspiring generations to come. Because in the end, Jack Callahan's story wasn't just about a soldier who stood up to a group of bullies. It was about a man who chose to lead by example, proving that one person truly can make a difference. And that legacy would endure forever. As the sun began to set over the academy grounds one evening, Jack Callahan stood on a hill overlooking the campus. The sight of the bustling activity below, the laughter of students, the sounds of discussions from classrooms, and the hum of progress, filled him with a deep sense of fulfillment. This was more than he had ever envisioned when he first began this journey. But Jack also knew that his role in the academy, and perhaps even the broader impact he was having, was shifting. Age was catching up with him, and he could feel the toll of his years of service and leadership. He had given so much of himself to others, and now it was time to consider what came next. A few weeks later, Jack received an invitation to speak at an international leadership conference in Geneva. The focus of the event was leadership in an uncertain world, and Jack's reputation as a figure of quiet resilience made him a perfect candidate. Jack hesitated. Though he appreciated the opportunity to share his message, he was increasingly drawn to spending more time in reflection, away from the public eye. However, after consulting with the board at the academy and Colonel Anderson, he decided to accept. This time, he wanted to focus his message not just on leadership but on legacy, how one could leave the world a better place by empowering others. The conference was a grand affair, held in a stunning glass building overlooking Lake Geneva. Jack arrived a day early, giving himself time to prepare and meet with other speakers. Among them were policymakers, humanitarians, and business leaders from around the globe. Jack felt a sense of humility as he listened to their stories, each one a testament to the power of perseverance and innovation. When it was Jack's turn to speak, the audience fell silent as he walked to the podium. He began with a story, one he hadn't shared publicly before. "Years ago," Jack started, "I found myself in an unexpected situation. A group of bikers surrounded me at a gas station. They were looking for trouble, and I was outnumbered. It wasn't the first time I'd faced danger, but what struck me that night wasn't the confrontation itself, it was what happened afterward." He went on to recount how Scar, the leader of the gang, had turned his life around after their encounter, using his own experiences to mentor at-risk youth. Jack spoke about the ripples of change that one act of integrity could create and how those ripples could touch lives in ways we might never fully understand. "That night," Jack continued, "I realized something important. Leadership isn't about standing above others. It's about standing with them, guiding them, and showing them what's possible. It's about planting seeds of hope, even in the most challenging circumstances." The room was silent as Jack finished, the weight of his words sinking in. Then, the applause began, slow at first but building into a thunderous ovation. Jack stepped back from the podium, his heart full. He had spoken his truth, and he could feel that it had resonated deeply. After the conference, Jack returned home to the academy, where he found himself increasingly drawn to the idea of stepping back from his active role. He had dedicated so much of his life to service, and now he wanted to spend more time with the people who mattered most: his family, his close friends, and the small circle of loved ones who had supported him through everything. But before he could retire, Jack wanted to ensure that the academy would continue to thrive without him. He spent the next year working closely with the board to develop a succession plan, identifying leaders who shared his vision and values. He also helped establish an endowment fund to ensure the academy's long-term sustainability. One evening, as Jack walked through the academy grounds, he was approached by Carla, the single mother who had graduated from the program and gone on to launch a successful initiative for survivors of domestic violence. Carla was now one of the academy's most respected instructors, mentoring students who, like her, were seeking to rebuild their lives. "Jack," Carla said, her voice filled with emotion, "I just wanted to say thank you. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And because of you, I'm able to help others the way you helped me." Jack smiled, his eyes softening. "You've done the work, Carla. I just gave you a nudge." "No," she said firmly. "You gave me hope. And that's something I'll never forget." As Carla walked away, Jack felt a deep sense of pride. Moments like these reminded him that his decision to step back wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of a new chapter for the academy and the countless lives it would continue to touch. On the day of his retirement ceremony, the academy organized a celebration to honor Jack's contributions. The event was held in the main auditorium, which was filled with students, staff, and alumni who had come to pay tribute to the man who had inspired them. One by one, speakers took to the stage to share their stories, how Jack had impacted their lives, how his teachings had shaped their paths, and how his example had given them the courage to lead with integrity. There were tears, laughter, and heartfelt expressions of gratitude. When it was Jack's turn to speak, he stood before the crowd, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "This academy was never about me," he said. "It was about you, all of you. You are the ones who carry this mission forward. You are the ones who will continue to make a difference in the world." He paused, looking out at the faces of the people he had come to know and care for. "If there's one thing I want you to remember, it's this: leadership isn't about power or prestige. It's about using your influence to lift others up. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard. And it's about leaving the world a little better than you found it." The audience rose to their feet, their applause echoing through the auditorium. Jack felt a mix of pride and humility as he stepped away from the podium, knowing that his work had made a lasting impact. In the years that followed, Jack embraced a quieter life. He spent his days tending to his garden, writing a memoir about his journey, and enjoying the simple pleasures he had often overlooked during his years of service. He remained involved with the academy as an advisor, but he was content to let others take the lead. One day, Jack received a letter from a young woman who had recently graduated from the academy. Enclosed was a photo of her standing with a group of children in a small village, where she had started a school to provide education to underserved communities. "Dear Mr. Callahan," the letter read, "I wanted to thank you for everything you've done. Your teachings gave me the courage to follow my dreams and make a difference. I hope this photo shows you just how far your legacy has reached." Jack stared at the photo, his heart swelling with pride. He had always believed that true leadership was about planting seeds, and now he could see the fruits of those efforts in the lives of others. As Jack folded the letter and placed it on his desk, he felt a deep sense of peace. His journey had been filled with unexpected twists and turns, but it had brought him to a place of profound fulfillment. For Jack Callahan, the measure of a life well lived wasn't found in accolades or accomplishments. It was found in the lives he had touched, the values he had shared, and the legacy he had left behind. And that legacy would endure for generations to come.